Every day, thousands of cars drive past the Parliament in Perth. Maybe some of the people will look up and see the Parliament, but most won't. But for the 40,000 people who walk through the doors of the Western Australian Parliament each year, one surprise they will get is that the Western Australian Parliament has the most extensive collection of the work of local artists of any parliament in Australia. It ranges from the beautiful artwork by some of Australia's finest Aboriginal artists. But how did this special collection come about? Dr. Elizabeth Constable, the former member of the Western Australian Parliament and a former minister, will give us some insight.
Well, I think that it's part of who we are. It's part of the history of the state, and so easily represents the state. The thing that I noticed really very early on was that there was no visible Indigenous art. First of all, we wanted to have pieces from the major art centres around the state to represent the state. So some Noongar art from the Kimberley through Warman that we've got here now, Balgo, Warburton and the Pilbara. So once we'd done that, we then started to flesh it out and fill in some of the gaps. It was such an important part of the centenary of the building, but it's an important part of who we are as well. It's a very peaceful room, and I have such great memories of meeting some of the artists here who wanted to see their work hung in Parliament House. So since 2004, the art itself was borrowed at that time. Since then it's developed. So how long is that, 13 years? Well, I have a particular interest in art from the Kimberley, and as we speak I'm looking at 3 beautiful pieces, 2 from Warman and 1 from Kununurra, the Peggy Griffiths piece, which is very, very, very beautiful. But I just like it for its whole representation of the state.
Here we are in the Members' Lounge in the Legislative Council. The Western Australian Parliament is very proud of the fact that we are the only state parliament with an artwork collection by Indigenous people, which is dedicated to honouring the culture of the original custodians of the land. Budja by Peter Farmer is an outstanding artwork. The custom-fused art glass is the work of Kim Fitzpatrick. It ranges from representing the ancient meeting sites of the traditional people of the 6 regions of Western Australia to the 6 seasons of the Noongar people. It successfully communicates universal themes of democracy and community in a unique Indigenous voice. Budja is enjoyed by members and visitors to the Parliament. This is the Aboriginal People's Room. This area was dedicated in 2004 on the 100th anniversary of this building as a constant reminder of the culture that existed in Western Australia for thousands of years before European settlement. And on display is some of the most beautiful work by local artists. Some are owned by the Parliament and some are on loan from individuals or from Edith Cowan University. The story of the seasonal hunters depicted in this painting illustrates the 6 seasons of the Noongar people. It is by acclaimed artist Tiliangu Lance Chad. Carol Martin, the former member for Kimberley, tells a story.
The story of the seasonal hunters depicted in this painting illustrates the 6 seasons of the Noongar people. The seasonal hunters instill cultural pride, self-worth and self-esteem because they represent knowledge, the environment, totemic laws, associated with the woggle, the snake and the river. Lance Chad, a Noongar Aboriginal artist from the southwest city of Bunbury, paints under his traditional tribal name, which is Jiliangu, which means old man. The landscape paintings represent the artist's personal claim of spiritual unity with his country and his land. It is this very genuine and authentic emotional involvement that lends Jiliangu's paintings their special appeal and which renders them accessible to any responsive audience. His breathtaking work is highly acclaimed in Australia, America and Japan. The artist has painted professionally since 1981 and his works are in many collections worldwide and locally, including the Art Gallery of Western Australia and the Burnt Museum collection. His unique, realistic style is akin to those of Hans Huyssen and Albert Namatjira, to whose works he was introduced at an early age.
This painting, also by Tiliangu, is of Bluff Knoll in the southwest of WA and shows the influence that the artists Albert Namatjira and Hans Huyssen had on Tiliangu's work. It is on loan from the Edith Cowan University Art Collection. As an internationally acclaimed artist, Tiliangu's work is obviously very prominent here. And this is songlines and dreaming trails, and is fused on art glass panels.
We thought that this really is an opportunity to create a meeting room of significance, and that it should be the Aboriginal people's room. So we set about creating what is now here. We had a deal with the museum to loan us some artwork. Because the upper house is poor, the purchasing of art came out of my budget. I forget how much we allocated each year, for $60,000 to $70,000 a year or somewhere in that area. We put together a committee, find young artists from each of the regions so that we could purchase their art and put them in this room.
Christopher Peace is a Noongar artist of French and Aboriginal ancestry. His mixed race roots are reflected in his paintings, which incorporate Indigenous iconographies with Western styles that explore the tensions and contradictions that resulted from European colonisation. The Roundhouse is based on a work by Wallace Bickley. The Woggle rises from the water like a giant sea monster ready to engulf passing ships. The foreground of the painting is overrun with white rabbits, a metaphor for the introduction of Western beliefs, eroding and destroying the Indigenous way of life as well as the environment. On the street is a chain gang being escorted to the Roundhouse, an infamous jail that was a drop-off point from which Indigenous people were shipped to Wodjumup, Rottnest Island. This is number 1 in the Homemakers series by Noongar artist Sandra Hill, and is oil on canvas. Sayo biscuits are well known in Australia. Less well known is that Sayo means Salvation Army officer, and the biscuits were mass-produced food for the poor.
These are Sandra Hill's own words. My recent work refers to the government's attempt to superimpose white domestic values over southwest Noongar culture and onto Aboriginal women in the late 1950s and 60s. As part of the assimilation policy of that era, Aboriginal families previously living in makeshift dwellings on the fringe of towns were taken and placed in modern white housing. They were then expected to learn how to take care of the property, literally overnight. The work expresses the absurdity of this preposterous notion. The women in particular were expected to disregard 50,000 years of Aboriginal learning and take on the white ways as they related to domestic situations.
Well, the first challenge was to establish the concept that I'd been to the New Zealand Parliament and been impressed by the Maori room there, and felt that we could do with a similar feature here with respect to the WA Parliament. And I felt needed to provide some symbolism that we were more than just a white settler institution. And it appeared that there were 2 opportunities there to do that. One was with respect to the Aboriginal artworks. We only had 1 piece of Aboriginal art. That was from a local government entity, because of course we have a collection of artworks from each of the municipalities in Western Australia. And one of those municipalities was primarily the old Shire of Menzies, essentially had an Indigenous majority, and we had a presentation of an Indigenous work of art from them. But we only had 1 piece of art. So I felt that in presenting Parliament as more than the white settler Parliament, we could have a collection to show that we were representative not only of 144 municipalities, but of the Aboriginal peoples as well.
Pauline Moran's triptych, Memories of Roland's Mission, is acrylic on canvas and tells the story of her time at Roland's Mission.
Like many of her generation, as a child, Pauline Moran was removed from her family and placed in Roland's Mission, near Collie in the southwest of Western Australia. Despite the unfortunate circumstances of her coming to be there, Pauline recalls her time at the mission fondly. Her paintings are joyful and lively vignettes representing the bonds and shared experiences of the children at the mission, despite their challenging circumstances.
Erwin Lewis was the first Aboriginal in Western Australia to attend university. His painting, Returned Soldiers, was a tribute to the Aboriginal soldiers who served alongside other Australian servicemen, beginning with the Boer War in South Africa from 1899 to 1902.
Little or no recognition was given to Aboriginal people who served. Through his art, Lewis portrays part of the history that he believes to have been untold or inaccurately recorded. His work also depicts many of the tragedies that Aboriginal people have suffered in the years since colonisation.
Honey Ants by Aaron Hayden is a vivid, colourful painting that draws you to it and demands your attention. It is acrylic on canvas.
Aaron Hayden's mother is a descendant of the Jackie people. Through his grandmother's family, he has traditional connections to the Eastern Districts and Yilgarn region, and through his grandfather he has connections to the Balladong people of the Avon region of Western Australia. Aaron's intricate paintings depict the different areas of his country and Australia's wildlife.
These slumped glass panels dominate the Aboriginal People's Room and are by artists from the Western Desert region.
These panels represent country images that are part of Pulpuri Davies and Tapadi Bates' established body of work based on the places and country significant to them. Mrs Bates and Mrs Davies have respect and authority in the Nutndinjarra world, and this work is a reflection of Nutndinjarra people's responsibility and deep relationship to land and the people who lived there before them. Madigan Thomas was born in Bullua or Violet Valley, south of Warman in Western Australia. The painting Cocky Boy is natural ochre and pigments on canvas. Madigan Thomas has painted two different bush birds found in Gidja country. On the left is the white Cocky Boy. The black cockatoos are sitting on the branches next to the white cocky. Marlene Harold was born in 1954 in Millstream Tablelands in the Pilbara, Western Australia. Her painting Early Morning Mist is acrylic on canvas. According to Nyinjabundi law, in the beginning the sky was very low. When the creation spirits, the Marga, arrived from the ground, they raised the sky and the world out of the ocean. When the world was soft, in the early morning the mist is seen rising over the water and is the smoke from Marga's breakfast fires.
A few years ago, a young boy was on a tour of Parliament with his school and didn't seem to want to leave the Aboriginal People's Room. The tour guide asked the young boy why he was so interested in the painting, and he replied that the artist was his grandmother.
Therese Naui has painted her father's country, which centres around Punta Jolpa, Juniper Wells, near the community of Kirakara. The painting depicts the different features of the country, including Tali, the sandhills, spinifex and desert trees, as well as puru, the bush tomato, and katajalli, raisins. The central circle is the wari, or the rock hole.
This room is used as a meeting room by members and staff. The Indigenous artwork is just one part of the remarkable art collection in the Parliament. This table is made from Western Australian timber, Jarrah and Marri. It also has one of the best views of the city. In the next episode, we will look at the rest of the parliamentary art collection.